Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the class. Let's wait for the other guys for 2 more minutes. All righty, can you hear me? I just switched to my audio, so I want to make sure that you can still hear me. Very nice. Thank you, Jeremy. Cool. So everyone, today we're going to continue to talk about crypto, and more specifically, we're going to talk about asymmetric cryptography. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, guys. I just took a bath and I have some another allergy. So cool. Thank you for blessing me. All right. Now let's continue. So last time we talked about asymmetric cryptography. We just started a little bit and we talked about RSA. And I bet some of you guys have already heard RSA before. Please just let me know, type in chat and let me know if you have or have not heard about RSA before, like not including what I have mentioned in last lecture. Good. So some of you guys heard about that. Some of you only heard about the name before, and some of you don't know it. Good. And don't worry if you don't know it, because after today's class, you will know it very well. So a little history about RSA. And this is actually the nice part that I like. I like crypto because usually those crypto, they're quite close to our age or say our time. And you can see, for example, for RSA, it's quite close. It's just like 40 years ago, approximately, right? So it's like 40 years ago, Ron Rivest. I hope that you do recall this name because we did mention about Ron Rivest previously. And I said that he is a very successful, cybersecurity researcher, and like RSA, the R represents him, and he also does a lot of other excellent regarding crypto systems. So RSA is created by these 3 researchers, and it is a general public key crypto system. And RSA was classified. There was a classified version of RSA created by Clifford Cox, and he implemented RSA, but at that time the crypto was classified. And then Ron, Ali, and Leonard, they again invented it, but separate from Clifford, and then they make it public. And this how RSA becomes public and becomes known to everyone, like you and me. And today I'm going to talk about the like how RSA is encrypted, decrypted, and how to generate a key. Although I do want to mention to you that the RSA that I am going to talk to you today, it's like a textbook RSA. It's just like, it's very different from how RSA is used in practice. And I will mention like some of the differences later. But overall, I want to know that today, after today's learning, you will know on a high level how RSA is work. But there are some tiny details. For example, how we're going to pad a message. What about this message is longer or shorter than a specific length? How are we going to make it long or short enough so that it can fit with the encryption or decryption scheme? So those are very tiny stuff, but actually it turns out that it's very important. And sometimes you may go wrong because of those tiny little bits of implementation. So that's okay. Let's first start with the math part of RSA. Let's first talk about encryption and decryption. Yesterday, I was preparing for our class and I was just like really hesitating about how to start. I hope that this is a nice way, which I make it like top down. So if you do have questions right now, type it in chat and I will answer you right now, or I will delay your question until I talk about later content. But I do want to raise your questions if you do have it. So I'm just gonna start with encryption and decryption first. You may not know where those where those decryption keys and encryption keys come from, which is fine, but still, let me just give you a high-level description for how RSA managed to encrypt or decrypt a message. All right, the first one is notation. Let's use E and D to denote encryption and decryption key. And then let's use M to denote plain text. And then use C to denote ciphertext. And then the way that RSA works to encrypt a message is to use exponential numbers. So it will do C is equal to M to the E mod N. So it's modular, a big number N. And later on, I will talk about what N is and how to generate an N. Let's right now just assume that N is a very large number. And then for decryption, it will have this, it will have, this is the plain text, and then plain text is equal to the ciphertext and then to the D, to the decryption key. So you use exponential numbers to calculate the ciphertext and the plain text. And you see here, the way that I calculate is the same. It's just the E and D is different. Okay, so far so good. Cool. And next, let's gonna talk about how we're gonna generate those keys, how we're gonna assign the value to N. So here, let's just be more concrete and then just like emphasize that those are something that we need to generate. We need to get the key, right? So we need to get encryption and decryption key. And also we need to generate this big number of N. How to generate them? Okay, let me switch to the next slide and clear this up. Let's first talk about how to generate N. We first choose 2 large prime numbers, P and Q. And I wanted to remember that they're large prime numbers. All right, and then we calculate the n as the multiplication of p and q. So n is equal to p times q. This is how an n is calculated. And then given the n, we then calculate E and D. All right. So we calculate E and D by firstly calculate the Euler's totient function. And you may not know about totient function before. By the way, guys, if you know it, please just type it in chat. And if you don't know it, please also just type it in chat, because I want to have a, brief understanding, like how many of you have heard about this or not heard about this. Okay, so most of you guys didn't hear about that before. That is totally fine. And you don't have to know the mathematical meaning of Euler's totient function in this lecture. But I want you to know two things about that. One is that how is this phi function being calculated? So phi of n, it is equal to p minus 1 times q minus 1. Although I wanted to know that this is only because that n is equal to the multiplication of two prime numbers. So if n is not equal to a multiplication of two prime numbers, this is going to be different. So here, n is equal to, again, phi of n is equal to p minus 1 times q minus 1 only when n is equal to pq and pq are prime. All right. So this is about phi. You don't have to know like why it's called phi, what is the mathematical implication for a totient function. All I want you to know right now is just like, this is the way that we can calculate phi given a multiplication of two prime numbers. Okay, and then given that, then we are going to calculate E and D. So we're going to choose two numbers, E and D, such that the multiplication of ED, so E times D, is equal to 1 modulo phi of n. And I'm going to pause here and make sure that you understand the math notation over here. And then like right now, if I give you an n, you know how to calculate, or say if I give you p and q, you know how to calculate n, how to calculate phi n, and then you can find E and D to satisfy this specific condition. All right, so far so good. Let's continue. Now we have ED and we have N. So for public key, we're gonna use both big N and E. So E is the key for encryption, and N is the large number that we need to do a modulo calculation. Yes, it's modulo. It's modulo. Thank you, Tanya, for correcting it. And then for decryption, you're gonna have D, and you're gonna have N, and then N is used for modulo calculation, and D is used for exponentiation. So right, and then for modulo, it means that you get the remainder of the division. Thanks, Peter, for explaining this. And then Michael was asking, how do we get a modulo with multiplication? So what you want to do can be like, you have the modulo n already, right? And then you just have modulo n plus 1, and where you have like k times modulo n, k times phi n, and then plus 1, and then you defactor it. So you can get those factors, and then you can choose a E and D such that the multiplication of ED is equal to some times of like k times phi of n plus 1. Okay, and then let's continue. So the first thing that I want you to do, I want to give some time and try to do this by yourself, is to prove the correctness of the decryption and encryption. So the goal for you is to calculate or is to prove that if we are given a message, we say plain text, this is M, and the M to the E, which is the ciphertext, right? So M to the E and then to the D is equal to M modulo M. And also, I already put all those necessary equations over here for you to refer. Remember that C is equal to M to the E, although you don't need to know about C right now. And then M is equal to C to the D, modulo N. And we know that for E and D, the multiplication of these two is equal to 1 modulo phi of N, and the N is equal to P times Q, and P and Q, they're prime numbers. And actually, knowing that P and Q is prime number, are prime numbers is important. Oh, for some reason, I cannot write. Okay, here we go. And then another hint is that according to Euler's theorem, for any A and N, if they are co-prime, meaning that the greatest common divisor for N and A is 1. So it's like there is no number that is greater than 1 that can be, like that both A and N can be divided by this specific number. So if N and A, if they are co-prime positive numbers, then, this is actually a big N here. So it is A to the phi of N is equal to 1 modulo N. And you will need this to prove the correctness of the message. Okay, and now I'm gonna give you some time to think about how to prove it. And Dean was showing his proof. So Dean, I have a question for the third part. Like you said that M to the E times D is equal to M to the 1 modulo N. And I want to ask you why M to the ED is equal to M to the 1 modulo N. Can you give me more details for that?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Does coprime just mean that both of them are prime?
No, this is a very good question. So coprime means that, so for example, let's say number 4 and 9. So neither of them are prime numbers, right? But they're coprime positive numbers because they don't share any prime factors. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, and then Tanner says that, M to the ED is equal to M to the 1 because M to the ED is equal to M to the phi of N times K plus 1. And then you have that M to the phi and then to the K and then times M, right? So my question for you, Tanner, is that, remember that in Euler's theorem, M to the phi of N is equal to 1 modulo N only when M and N, they're coprime. They're coprime positive numbers. So what if they're not coprime? Can you still prove that this is correct? Okay, guys, I'm gonna do this math with you together. So let's work on this together. And Dean and Tanner are giving us a very good direction. So how we're gonna solve this problem? We may want to divide this into two different situations. The first situation is that M and N, they're coprime. And the second situation is M and N, they're not coprime. So let's just do this together. The first, let's just do the situation one by one. Start from the simple one. That's my suggestion. So let's first assume that, let's say, suppose M and N are coprime. Okay, so if they are coprime, then according to our definition over here, M to the E to the D is equal to M to the ED, right? And then because of this, we know that ED is equal to 1 modulo phi of N. So we can make ED be equal to K to the phi of N times 1. And then we have M to the K times phi N times M, right? And then according to Euler's theorem, this part is equal to M to the phi N and then to the K. And then we know this is equal to 1. So this is equal to 1 to the K times M. It is equal to M modulo N. And then here, K is just means that if ED is equal to 1 modulo phi N, it must be that, ED is equal to phi N times some coefficient. We just make this as K, like some coefficient times phi N plus 1. And this is why ED will be equal to 1 modulo phi N. Okay, and now, this is the case when M and N are coprime. And then let's look at the second case. If M and N are not coprime. And then because N is equal to P times Q, right? So if M is not a coprime of N, then M must be, a multiplication of either P or Q. So right now, without the loss of generality, we just assume that M is a multiplication of P. So let me write here. M should be like either P can divide M or Q can divide M. Then without loss of generality, we just right now looking at this P part. So in this case, let's just say M is equal to, I'm going to use another arbitrary value, maybe let's say T. T times P, okay? So if M is equal to T times P, then let's try to do this M to the E to the D again. And this is equal to T times P, and then to the E to the D, right? And this is equal to T to the ED times P to the ED. And for this first term, we know that this T must be, coprime with Q. So we can, sorry, just give me a second, guys. I am trying to remember how I managed to prove it before. Okay. So here, T to the ED, we know that T is not something related to P, right? So we know that T and P is equal to 1, like they're co-prime, because P is a prime number. And also T and Q is co-prime, because Q is a prime number as well. So we know that T and N, they are co-prime, right? So this we can know T and N, they are co-prime. So then if you only look at this term, T to the ED, and then we have T to the ED modulo N, then similar to the previous one, we know that this is gonna be equal to T, right? So we're gonna have T times P to the ED mod N. Let me just take a look at this again, do a double check. Yep, this is correct, right? And then let's just look at P to the ED, right? So we know that P is a part of N, right? But then what we could do is that right now, we can look at N, and then we can, N is equal to P times Q. So we know that for P to the ED, that is equal, P to the ED is equal to 1 if you modulo Q, right? So here, what you could get is that in this case, then, sorry, actually, maybe I'm writing this wrong. P is equal to P modulo Q, right? And then, so here, what we can get is this part is equal to T times P mod N, and you can get this is equal to M. And now we have this calculation. So we know that even though that M and N, they're not co-prime, they share some common prime numbers, you will still get that M to the ED is equal to M modulo N. Okay. So this is how we can prove that M to the ED is equal to M modulo N. So we know that whenever we have a message, and if we are using the way that we generate N and generate ED, we can always get the correct message back if we do a decryption and encryption followed by a decryption. So whenever you decrypt a ciphertext, you will get the correct plain text. All right. Now let's continue. So now we know that RSA is correct. Then let's start to talk about those security property for RSA. So the first thing is about confidentiality. I want to give you guys a moment and think about, is this true that RSA is can support confidentiality? Suppose that we have a bad person, Eve, and then Eve can get the ciphertext and then get those public key information, which is the big number of N, and the encrypted key, which is E. So if Eve's goal is to get either Q or to get the plain text, sorry, not Q, here is D, I mean the decrypted key, the decryption key. So if Eve's goal is to either get a decryption key or to get this plain text given a ciphertext, then can we make sure that it's going to be very hard for Eve to get this to value given what Eve already have? And it turns out that this is hard because usually given a very large number, if we have a very large number n, because it is computationally infeasible that you want to factor a big number n. And this is part of the reason why for n, in practice, we really need to make this like very huge. We need to have both p and q very huge so that the multiplication of them, which is equal to n, is very huge. And usually we want to make sure that the p and q, they are different, and also they are like they're not like they're quite close. You don't want to have something like maybe p is very large but q is a very small prime number, because that means that if someone's going to want to try to factor n, then it's going to be very easy for him to guess or say to brute force all different kinds of prime factors. And also, this is one of the possibilities that someone can break RSA. So if n is not a very big number, if p and q, both of them, they're not like, if either of them are not very big, then someone can factor n very quickly. And then, so think about this. If Eve can factor n, right? So if E can get p and q, then Eve can calculate phi n using this the calculation for Euler torsion function. And then because of that, and then also because Eve knows about E, then Eve can calculate the D, but just like try by solving this modular equation, and then he will know about E. So you don't want this happen. So that's why you want to make sure that Eve will not be able to know P and Q, even though Eve knows about M. Okay, so this is about confidentiality. And the next about message integrity. And this is a question for you guys. What if an attacker flips a bit, or say, what if there is a correction during the communication? Like when the message is traveling from Alice to Bob, and this message may have some noise, like there might be some noise in the network, and then maybe some of the flits in the message got flipped. So the question is, will Bob be able to know that this message got changed, like either accidentally or maliciously by an attacker? If the answer is yes, then the question is, how do you think that Bob will be able to notify it? But there's no prime. I mean, prime is not public. So prime, the number of P and Q is not public information. So Bob will not be able to know P and Q. Even though Bob knows about P and Q, how would Bob know that whether or not this message has been changed? Using a checksum. That is a good idea. Okay, and then I'm gonna follow Nicolo's idea. Let's try to use a checksum, right? For example, like MD5 or SHA, whatever checksum that you think is secure, right? And those checksum are usually called cryptographic hash functions. And then I just list some examples over here. So if we do not have hash functions like this, it's going to be very hard for Bob to notice it, because for Bob, he just receive a bunch of bit, and it's like yet another number, right? And then Bob is going to just use his normal way to decrypt or encrypt the message, and then he would just get another message, which is different from the one that Alice originally sent. But if we do have the cryptographic hash functions, we can add a checksum. So we can add a checksum to it so that Bob will notice that this message may or may not be changed. So a cryptography hash function needs to satisfy those properties. First of all, it is a one-way function, meaning that if someone knows about this checksum, it's very hard for this guy to revert back to to get the original message according to the checksum value. And also it's deterministic, meaning that every time you use hash functions with the same message, you will get the same checksum. And the third is a small change in the original message will change the entire output, meaning that if you just change m, like if we're going to use hm to denote the checksum of a message, if you only change like a tiny bit in the m, the entire h will be changed dramatically. So you will not be able to see, you will not be able to tell whether or not m changed like a lot or just a little by looking at the hash function. Also, given an m and a hash of m like a checksum, it's going to be very hard to find another message m such that their two hash functions are the same. So there's like they collide with each other. It's going to be very hard to find a specific message that is collided with the current message. And then last but not the least, you want to make sure that all different kind of like all different with arbitrary size will all be calculated to a fixed size. And this comes for MD5 and SHA-256, and also there's like other different kinds of hash functions. And back to this message integrity problem, what we could do is that we can calculate a hash function for a specific message. And the reason why we use hash functions is because usually, for public key cryptography, it's fairly expensive. So if you are going to sign a message, that means that you're going to just, like, for example, if you're going to do sign, if A wants to sign a message, or say A wants to make a statement or to prove that this message truly comes from Alice herself, so she can sign a message. And the way that it works is she can use his secret key as of A to sign this particular message. But usually this message can be very long, it can be very short. If it's very long, then it's going to be very expensive to sign this specific message. Then what she can do alternatively is to convert m to the hash. So you can use the hash function, making this is a fixed length and also like is a reasonably short length of message so that she can sign this message efficiently. And then Alice just send this signed message along with the plain text of the message. And now the question for you guys is that if you're Bob and you received this message, how are you going to validate this message? And meanwhile, I'm going to go through the chat. I saw some questions over there. So Christian is asking, can we see an example of it? An example about what? I guess this is the example that we want to see. But if it's not, just let me know. And then Alexandra was asking, hasn't MD5 be solved? So I wouldn't say MD5 is solved, but definitely agree with you that MD5 is less secure right now because people can find collisions. Like people can use like reasonable amount of time to find collisions. So that's why MD5 is no longer as secure as before. Right. And then Dean was answering my question, how Bob should validate the message. So he said that you just do a hash and then decrypt the signature with Alice's public key and then see if they match. That's exactly the answer it is. So what you want to do is that you give an m, you calculate hash m. And then given the signature, which is signed by Alice's secret key, you solve it using the public key, right? So solving using A's public key, you will get the hash of m. So in theory, these two should be equal. But if it's not the same, then it means that there's something wrong with the message. Okay, and then the next question is, what if Eve alters M to be M prime? So same as what Dean says is like similar to the first question, how to validate the message. Suppose that Eve alters M to M prime. So in this case, Bob will again like calculate the hash of M prime and also calculate the decrypted message, or say like the encrypted message for the signature of M. And he will realize that these two values are not the same. So then Bob will know that someone alters M to be another message. And looking at the chat, Peter was asking, does M prime just mean the bits are flipped? Not quite. I mean, M prime can be anything. It can be like just totally change the message. And it doesn't matter like how M prime is being changed. As long as M and M prime are different, the hash that you will get will be different. And right now we're just assuming that it's going to be very hard for Eve to really find a specific M prime that is different from M, and also the hash is the same. Right, so it's just an altered message. And what is seed M? Seed M is defined here. So seed M is assigned hash of M. Okay. Also, I saw Thomas answering the questions for Marcos. Thanks, Thomas, for that. That's great. Now let's continue. So far we talked about RSA. We talked about those security properties that RSA has or doesn't have naturally. And if RSA doesn't have it, such as message integrity, we're talking about how to mitigate that. So the way that we mitigate it is to use hash functions. And then followed by that, I want to talk about another topic, which is related to both symmetric and asymmetric cryptography. And this is a question that many of you have asked before. And now is the time for us to talk about this. So the question is, how are we going to exchange key? How can we let other people know a key security? If we're assuming that there is an Eve sitting in the middle, or someone that can eavesdrop this channel that, maybe Alice and Bob, they're communicating, so the channel itself is insecure. But how can we share a secret? Share, it's a key or something else, but like share something in common, both Alice and Bob will know about it. But still, like this is something that even though there's someone eavesdropping or spoofing in the middle, he himself will not know about this shared secret. And I'm not gonna, you are not obligated to come up with this by yourself. Otherwise, you will become, Diffie-Hellman, you will become, a very great crypto researcher. But I would just like introduce this idea to you. So Diffie-Hellman creates this very smart, very cute key exchange method. And in fact, Diffie-Hellman key exchange scheme is perhaps the first application of asymmetric cryptography. So just like they use this asymmetric way to exchange this secret among two parties in an insecure communication channel. And the high level idea, this is my understanding, but it's like I feel that this is something that I extracted from the exchanging approach. So the high level idea is that each party, suppose there are two parties, Alice and Bob, they're gonna share the secret. This shared secret can be symmetric key. So a key that they will be using to encrypt and decrypt their message. But then the way that they have symmetric key is not going to be like Alice or Bob or someone like who generates this entire key and then share this with the other party. The way that works is that both of them, like both Alice and Bob, they're going to contribute part of this shared secret. And then later on, they get the other part from the other party, and then they use their own part, combine that with the parts that comes from the other people. So they hold one part of this shared secret, and then they send this shared secret, this part to the other party. They receive the other part from the other party, and then they calculate it offline to get the overall shared secret. So this is idea number one. But then you remember that, what if someone in the middle, then they get both parts coming from, the two parties. When Alice sends her shared part to Bob, and then when Bob sends his shared part to Alice, then Eve sits in the middle, Eve gets both parts. So to solve this problem, when Alice and Bob, they share their part, they're gonna encapsulate it. They're gonna put it in something so that even though Eve spoofs this part, Eve cannot revert it back to the actual secret, the actual part of shared secret. And then the question is, how are we going to design this encapsulation? And later on, we'll show you how this how this happens. And then, finally, then as what I said, even though, the attacker gets the encapsulated message, he will not be able to inverse this part back. So he will not be able to get the shared secret. Okay, so this is high level idea. And now let's go to a concrete example. So you don't have to understand what these colors mean, like yellow, green, red, etc. But when I show you this example, you will get to understand what this means, like this picture, what it's really talking about. So now let's suppose that Alice and Bob, they want to share a secret value. And then before that, Alice and Bob, they first agree to numbers, a P and a G. And these two numbers, they're public. So these numbers, Eve also know it. So Eve also knows these two numbers. The first thing that Alice is going to do is that Alice will first come up with her secret value. And also Bob will come up with his secret value. We're assuming that what Alice comes up is 4 and Bob's is 3. And this is something that Eve doesn't know. Eve doesn't know about AS and BS. And then only Alice knows about AS. At this point, Bob also doesn't know about AS and Alice doesn't know about BS. Okay? And now let's continue. This is the way that Alice and Bob is gonna encapsulate this secret part and send it to the other person. The way that it works is that Alice will do 5 to the 4, meaning that this is like G, right? G to the AS modulo P. And you see that this is actually, it's quite similar to RSA. Like they both use exponential numbers. So Alice will calculate G to the AS modulo P, and which is equal to 4. And Alice will send this number, value of 4, to Bob. And similarly, Bob will calculate G to the BS modulo P and then send that to Alice. When they exchange this information, Eve knows both. However, even though that Eve knows about this both numbers, like Eve knows about 4, knows about P, it's going to be very hard for Eve to calculate this, which is called discrete logarithm. And discrete logarithm is similar to this like factor, big number factor problem. It is known to be computationally infeasible. So it's going to be very expensive for Eve, or say it's going to be not impossible to Eve for Eve to spend a reasonable amount of time to reverse it back to calculate what is the log number for G given the modular number of P. This is called, let me again say this again. This is called discrete log. Discrete logarithm. Okay. And I show this here. I'm gonna erase this so that you can see this red sentence. So inferring X knowing the exponential value modular a particular value is known to be hard. So there's no way for Eve to infer that. And then Alice, by receiving the 10 value from Bob, she will just calculate the rest of it offline. And also Bob will calculate the rest of offline. And if you see here over there, if you see this, this is equal to G to the BS and then to the AS, right? Which is equal to G to the BS times AS. Of course, this is modular P. And then similarly for Bob, what Bob gets is that Bob gets G to the AS from Alice. And then he just do another exponential again. So he got G to the AS times BS, which is equal to this one, modular P. So in this way, they share a message. And this message is equal to G to the BS times AS all the time. And this is very smart. I mean, for me, when I learned about this, I feel this is really mind-blowing. They just use this very interesting, nice feature regarding discrete log as well as the exponential number to solve this problem. They can share something that no one will be able to notice in the middle. And Dean was asking the message, Dean was asking a question. Can the attacker mislead Alice and Bob about what a shared secret is? That's a very good question. Yes, so it means that if there's attacker, if sits in the middle and if alter the message, right? So if alter the message, that yes, Diffie-Hellman will got screwed up. But usually when really Diffie-Hellman was used, they're gonna like have this used with authentication with the like the hash function, those that we just talked about, which guarantees that the message will not be able to be altered by malicious people such as Eve. All right, the next topic that I want to talk about is, another thing for public key or for secret key is that how do you trust public keys? This is also related to Dean's question, like what if someone just changed something? What if, for example, what if Eve just replaces all the public keys with their own, so that someone will think that this is a public key for Alice, but actually it comes from Eve, and then Eve can just use his secret key to decrypt all the message they are supposed to send to Alice, because no one knows what the true Alice public key is. They thought that Eve's public key is Alice public key. And that comes a problem. How are we going to trust the public key that we receive from other people? How are we going to trust that this truly comes from this particular person? There are two ways in the real world that tries to, like two different kinds of schemes. The idea is totally different, but the goal is the same, which is to protect or which is to support the trustworthy for public key. The first one is called Public Key Infrastructure PKI. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about this before. Let me know if you do or do not. So for PKI, the way that it works is that it has a certificate authority. So meaning that it has like a centralized, or say it has some organization that we know and we trust. Like we know that they are the right person. They are the ground truth, or they're the quote unquote God. Like they know this is correct and we trust them. And for certificate authority, they're responsible for verifying the identity of the person who sends a specific public key to everyone. So if Eve sends a public key and claiming that this is a public key of Alice, then CA will check the identity. CA will send a message to Eve saying that, okay, show me your identity, show me your ID that you are truly Alice. And if Eve cannot do it, then CA will just revoke this public key. Or CA can just delegate this to other trusted CAs. Like there are many CAs. So, and also those CAs, they have a hierarchy. Like they can delegate this to his other CAs and then do this identification, do the identity verification for them. And it's like very nice, structured and responsible organization who's going to be in charge of public key identification and public key authorization. And the security goal for that is, they're going to issue the calling card certificate. Like certificate is a thing to prove that this person's public key is truly belongs to this specific person. And of course, they can revoke a certificate if they found that someone just give a wrong message or someone is no longer owns this specific public key. And an example for PKI, which I believe is something that you guys already noticed, or like this happens for daily life. So it's HTTPS, or say the TLS/SSH protocol. So the way that TLS SSL protocol works is to use PKI. They're going to use PKI to prove that this website truly from a legitimate person. It's not a phishing website. So that is why if you look at our website, or if you look at Adam's personal website, if you look at my personal website or ASU's website, you will all see this lock over here. I know that different browsers, they will have their different notation. I'm using Chrome. This is what it is showing in my Chrome browser. And if you look at like Edge or other like Safari, you will have different notation. But basically, you will see something here. It can be something in green, or can be a lock message showing that this is a legitimate website. And in fact, if you are doing something, for example, like shopping, usually a legitimate website, like a shopping website, like Macy's, they always have their HTTPS enabled. So if you go to a website and you didn't see an HTTPS, you need to be, extremely careful, because this first, it means that the communication between you and the specific website is not going to be encrypted. So someone can spoof in the middle, get the message that you send and you got from the specific website. Also, from the other hand, it may hint that this website is not a legitimate website, because there's no PKI, there's no CA gives the certificate to this specific website, like proving that this website comes from a true and correct identity. So you want to be extra careful about that. Okay, and then that is about PKI. And there's another and more interesting idea of how to prove the correctness of a public key. And this is called Web of Trust. So for Web of Trust, there's no centralized organization. There's no certificate authority that will prove the identity of other people. But instead, they make this in a distributed way. So everyone can prove other people. It's not going to be like the government to decide who's going to be who's the right person, who's not the right person. It's going to be everyone, like you and me, going to decide who is the right and who is not the right person. And related to this, it has like this comes with a key signing party, meaning that everyone will just exchange their public key with the other person, and also meanwhile he's going to show his maybe IDs or some other legitimate proof for himself to tell the other people that, hey, this is my public key, and this is my identity. And usually this public key will also contains the information about myself. Like it will say that this public key belongs to, for example, like Tiffany Bell. And then I will just show my ID to you, and you will know that, okay, this is like this guy who's showing the key to me is truly Tiffany Bell. So this public key is belonging to this correct person. So everyone got a chance to decide who to trust, and everyone got to decide, whether or not we should verify this specific public key. And if you trust the person, and if you do want to verify the identity of this person, you can sign this public key. And also those trusts, they can be propagated. You can pass the trust to other people, and someone, if they trust you, they can also trust the person that you trust. And this is very interesting. We were not gonna have an in-person key signing party, but we will have a remote key signing party as part of our assignment. So be prepared for that. You will have a key signing party. And actually the goal for you is to make sure that your key will be signed by other people. And meanwhile, you're gonna be an attacker. You can create some fake key and try to persuade other people to sign, like to acknowledge your fake public key. So you will be both benign people and bad people. And we will score you based on the number of signature that you get for your true public key, as well as the number of support, like which is the signature that you get for your fake public key. All right, and that's pretty much for everything about cryptography. And I want to have a wrap up for crypto part. So in this session, throughout the semester, we talk about a bunch of things in terms of cryptography. We first talk about symmetric cryptography, which I already showed the wrap up before. So we talk about the stream cipher, we talk about block cipher, we talk about the security properties for each types of symmetric crypto. And then followed by that, we talk about asymmetric cryptography. Specifically, we talk about RSA, this specific crypto system. We talk about how RSA works, and we talk about the confidentiality of RSA and the message integrity. And we mentioned that for RSA, it has this nice support for confidentiality, but it doesn't have a support for message integrity. And to fix that, we can use hash functions. There's some specific properties that a hash function must satisfy in order to be called a legitimate hash function. And then we talk about how to exchange keys. This is a problem for both symmetric and asymmetric crypto because we need to give our keys to other people, right? So one way to share keys is to use Diffie-Hellman. Diffie-Hellman is going to be very helpful for symmetric crypto when they have to share a specific keys that will be used throughout the entire encryption-decryption communication, right? But Diffie-Hellman itself is also at the symmetric crypto because they use this nice property that they can, like someone just can calculate the exponential number of the other number given the secret key. So given the key that they created by themselves and given a part of secret key coming from the other person, they just combine them together offline, and then they can calculate the actual shared secret. Even though that someone such as Eve sits in the middle and spoof the entire communication, he cannot recover this back. And another thing is how we're gonna trust the public key. What if I send a public key to you, but actually someone in the middle, Eve, just changed the public key, right? So there are two ways that we can, support public key trustworthy. One is called public key infrastructure. And it is a really an infrastructure composing by CAs, and they have this right. They have the they can authorize the public key by looking at the specific identity. And the real world example would be SSL or TLS, like HTTPS protocol. And another way to guard public key trustworthy is to use web of trust. So this is a distributed approach. Everyone can get this right everyone has this chance to prove the identity of other people, and they're going to use their own key to sign so that they know that the trust is legitimate, and then also they can pass the trust to other people. If I trust you, then I'm going to sign key, and other people, if they see what I have signed using my public key, if they trust me, right, they can also see what I have trusted, so they can pass this trust to other people. And that's it for cryptography. We have everything covered, and starting from next lecture, we're going to start with a new session. All right. We still have some time left for today's lecture, so I am gonna leave it to you guys. If you have questions, just ask me. And then in terms of assignment, some of you already asked me like when it will be released. So we will probably have, well, I mean, we will have 1 or 2 assignments regarding crypto. And the first assignment will be released either by the end of this week or the early next week. And I will announce it once the assignment is released. This assignment will, like the deadline will be about 1 week later. So if I'm gonna release this week, then the deadline will be next week. If I am like if I release it, say in the next week, then the deadline will be maybe the next week, depending. Like I will make sure that you will have a week to finish the assignment. All right. Good. And thank you, everyone. I am gonna start recording. I'm gonna stop recording.